Beneath the cold gray rain of Windsor Castle, a young royal turns the pages of his ancestors' diaries. Each line is steeped in pain. I didn't choose the throne. The throne chose me. Sacrifices, abandoned dreams, and tears never shed in public. At just 12, George understands that the throne is not just glory, it's a cage. He faces not only the pressure of the media, but also his grandfather parents and the legacy of his grandmother Diana. Yet instead of running, he chooses the harder path to be a king on his own terms. Not by blood, but by justice. Not by power, but by understanding. This isn't just the story of a prince, it's the story of a generation daring to speak for itself. Rain patters softly against the towering stained glass windows of Windsor Castle. The wind whistles through ancient stone corridors, as if whispering tales the walls have witnessed for centuries. In a secluded corner of the castle, the sound of childish laughter mingles with the patter of hurried footsteps on polished wooden floors. Prince George, a 12-year-old with tousled blonde hair and bright blue eyes, is playing hide-and-seek with his mother, Princess Kate, and his younger siblings, Charlotte and Louis. "I'm hiding, Mum. You'd better not find me." George shouts, his voice clear, but tinged with mischief. He slips through an old wooden door, descending a dusty spiral staircase. The secret cellar of Windsor Castle, a place he knows his mother would never think to look. Inside the cellar, the air is cold and damp. The beam of George's small flashlight dances across ancient wooden shelves, laden with linen-covered trunks yellowed with age. He pauses, curiosity piqued. Windsor Castle is full of secrets, but this is the first time he's ventured here. A thrill like the promise of something monumental stirs in his chest. George pulls a trunk forward, sending a cloud of dust into the air that makes him cough. Inside, there's no gold or jewels as he'd imagined, just old leather-bound journals tied with faded red silk ribbons. Carefully, he opens one, his eyes scanning the handwritten lines penned in a firm but emotional script. December 10th, 1936. My brother chose love over the throne. I don't blame Edward, but I'm terrified. This responsibility isn't one I chose. It chose me. I want to abdicate, but they say the kingdom will collapse. What do I do when my heart doesn't belong to the throne? George frowns. This is the handwriting of his great-grandfather, King George VI. He'd heard stories of the king who led Britain through World War II with courage, but no one told him the man had wanted to give it all up. A strange feeling creeps into George's heart, as if he's touched an old family wound. He opens another journal, this one belonging to his great-grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II. The words written in sharp blue ink are resolute yet tinged with sorrow. June 2nd, 1953, my coronation day. They placed the crown on my head, but it was heavier than I expected. I've sacrificed so much, the love of a mother, moments with my children, my own dreams. But the kingdom needs me, and I cannot turn back. George closes the journal, his heart pounding. He'd never thought of his great-grandmother, the woman the world revered, as someone with private pain. In photographs, she was always calm, her smile steady, her gaze resolute. But now through these words, he sees her struggles, her sacrifices, and it scares him. "George, where are you?" His mother's voice echoes from above, snapping him back to reality. He stuffs the journal into his coat pocket, switches off the flashlight, and races up the stairs. But a question begins to take root in his mind. If both my great-grandfather and great-grandmother wanted to walk away, why must I carry on? Back in the cozy sitting room of the castle, Princess Kate lounges on a sofa, Louis crawling around her feet while Charlotte scribbles on a piece of paper. George enters trying to act casual, but his eyes betray his unease. "You're a good hider." Kate smiles, ruffling his hair. "But next time, don't go to dangerous places, okay?" "Yes, Mum," George replies softly. He sits beside her, but his mind lingers in the cellar. The words of his great-grandparents are etched into his thoughts, stirring a mix of curiosity and dread. He glances at his mother, always gentle yet strong, and wonders if she too hides pain like theirs. "Are you okay, George?" Kate asks suddenly, her sharp eyes catching his unease. "I'm fine, Mom," he says quickly, forcing a smile. But inside, he's far from fine. He's just opened a door to his family's past, a past filled with sacrifice, duty, and secrets. And he's not sure he's ready to face it. That night in his vast bedroom, George secretly pulls out his great-grandfather's journal. The lamplight illuminates the words as if telling the story of a man trapped between his heart and his crown. He reads the final entry. "I didn't choose the throne, but I chose the kingdom, and that's the only thing I could do." George closes the journal and lies back on his bed, staring at the intricately carved ceiling. He thinks of his father, Prince William, who always smiles for the public, but sometimes sighs when he thinks no one sees. He thinks of his mother, who shields him, but whose eyes reveal exhaustion after long battles with illness. And he thinks of himself, a boy destined to be king, yet never asked if he wanted it. He whispers to himself, "If it's all this painful, what's the point of the throne?" The question, like a pebble dropped into a still lake, sends ripples far and wide, and George knows his journey to find answers has only just begun. Night falls over Kensington Palace, cloaking it in silence, broken only by the ticking of a grandfather clock in the sitting room. George huddles in a large armchair in the private library, the blue glow of an iPad illuminating his face. He's long mastered sneaking onto devices, not to do anything wrong, but because he knows his online activity is monitored. The royal advisors, with their stern suits and cold eyes, always watch him. For your own good, they say. George doesn't believe them. Carefully, he enters a password into a hidden app, a private browser he learned about from a school friend. His fingers tap the screen, typing, "Princess Diana leaving royal family." He's not sure what he's looking for, but after reading his great-grandparents' journals, a strange urge drives him to learn about his grandmother, known to him only through vague stories and old photos. Search results flood the screen, articles, analyses, and controversial blogs. George clicks on one titled "Princess Diana, Her Plan to Escape the Royals and Her Mysterious Death." His heart races. He glances at the door, ensuring no one is near, and begins to read. The article describes how his grandmother, Princess Diana, planned to leave the royal family with his father and Uncle Harry. It says she wanted to free her sons from the toxic system of the monarchy, where she felt trapped and isolated. But her plan failed. Some sources claim the royal family intervened, stopping her, and that the 1997 Paris car crash wasn't just an accident. A name in the article sends a chill down George's spine: Camilla. They call her the figure in the shadows, suggesting she was indirectly linked to covering up the truth. George's throat tightens. He recalls meeting Camilla, the woman with a polite smile, but eyes that always felt distant. Could she, the queen consort beside his grandfather Charles, really be tied to such a dark secret? Or is this just tabloid nonsense, as his father often warns? He shuts off the iPad, but the words linger in his mind. He thinks of Diana, whose memory his father recalls with a heavy voice, but few details. He pictures her photos, her radiant smile masking sad eyes. Did she feel as trapped as he does now? The next morning at the royal dining table, George sits across from his parents. Kate slices bread for Louis while William skims a morning paper. The mood is light, but George feels a weight in his chest. "Dad," he says, his voice trembling slightly, "I read some articles about Grandma Diana. They said she wanted to leave the royal family and that someone stopped her." William lowers the paper, his eyes sharp. "George, where did you read that?" His voice is calm but edged with tension. Online, George replies, trying to sound steady. "I was just curious. Is it true she wanted to leave? And why did she die like that?" William sighs, exchanging a quick glance with Kate. "Son, the tabloids make things up to get attention. What they write about your grandmother, most of it's not true. She was an incredible woman, but she faced a lot of pressure. What you need to remember is that she loved you and always wanted the best for our family." George nods, but his father's words don't satisfy him. He looks to his mother, hoping for clarity. "Mum, do you know anything about it?" Kate pauses, her knife still in hand. Her gentle smile doesn't hide her hesitation. "George, you're still young. Some things, they're more complicated than what you see online. When you're older, you'll understand." Her response stings like a small cut. George hates how adults always say when you're older. It makes him feel dismissed, like he's just a piece in the grand royal puzzle, not entitled to the truth. George's school, nestled among Berkshire's green hills, is the closest he gets to feeling like a normal kid. Here he's not Prince George, heir to the British throne, but George Wales, a student with a canvas backpack and muddy trainers. But today, even this sanctuary can't shield him from the storm brewing inside. At lunch under the shade of oak trees, George sits with his best friends Tom, son of a diplomat, and Sophie, a redhead who never stops talking. They're debating a new movie, but George's mind drifts. For days, he's been haunted by what he read about Diana, the journals of his great-grandparents and his parents' evasive answers. Each night, he lies awake, wondering if the throne, his supposed destiny, is worth it. "George, you okay?" Sophie asks, noticing his silence. "You look like you're on the moon." George forces a smile, pulling himself back. "I'm fine, just thinking about stuff at home." "Your home's probably a fancy palace, right?" Tom teases. "Ever get tired of being a prince? I mean, people staring at you all the time must be exhausting." Tom's question pierces George's thoughts. He looks down at his shoes, fingers gripping his uniform jacket. For a moment, the walls he's built to hide his feelings crumble. "I'm not sure what the throne even means to me," he blurts out. "Maybe I don't want to be king." The air goes still. Sophie and Tom stare wide-eyed as if he said something unthinkable. George realizes he's gone too far. "I mean, just kidding," he mumbles, but his shaky voice betrays him. Sophie laughs, thinking it's a joke. "If you ditch the throne, all of England would lose it." But Tom, ever curious, frowns. "Are you serious, George?" Before George can respond, the lunch bell rings. He jumps up, muttering an apology, and rushing to class, his heart pounding. He tells himself it was just a careless comment, that Sophie and Tom will forget it. But he doesn't know his words are like a stone tossed into a lake, sending ripples far beyond his control. 2 days later, the storm breaks. George is in the school library, reading about British history when a teacher rushes in. "George, you need to return to the palace now. There's a problem." Before he can ask, he's whisked into a car with 2 tense bodyguards. As the car rolls through tree-lined roads, George spots a newspaper on the seat. The bold headline freezes him. Prince George questions his role. The throne means nothing. He skims the article. An anonymous student, likely Tom or someone who overheard, told a reporter. The tabloids blew it up, turning a boy's fleeting words into proof of a royal crisis. They claim George disrespects tradition, that he doesn't grasp his duty. Some even speculate he's influenced by rebellious ideas from Diana's story. George's face burns with shame and anger. He didn't mean for the world to know his thoughts. He just wanted to be honest just once. That night, alone in his room, George stares out the window. Reporters' camera flashes flicker beyond the palace gates, despite security's efforts. He opens his iPad, sneaking back to the hidden browser. A new article appears. Is the young prince following Princess Diana's path? George shuts the screen, his heart heavy. He doesn't want to hurt his family, but he also doesn't want a life where every word and feeling is controlled. He thinks of Diana, who tried to escape but failed, and he wonders if he has the courage to find his own path, or if the royal machine will swallow him like it did his father, his great-grandparents, and so many before. Buckingham Palace, with its grand corridors and portraits of past monarchs, has never made George feel smaller than today. He stands before a massive oak door, hands clenched, trying to steady his breathing. At 12, he's never been summoned to a formal meeting like this. But the scandal from his careless schoolyard words has ignited a fire the royal family can't ignore. He knows that behind this door, the most powerful people await to decide his future. The door opens and George steps into the meeting room. The air is heavy, as if compressed by stern gazes. Around a long wooden table sit royal advisors in crisp gray suits and a government representative, a middle-aged man with gold-rimmed glasses, his eyes judging George's every breath. Prince William sits at one end, his face tense but composed. Princess Kate sits beside him, hands clasped tightly, her eyes worriedly fixed on her son. Camilla, Queen Consort, sits in a far corner, lips pursed, silent. Prince George, the man with glasses, begins, his voice even but sharp. "Do you understand why we're here?" George nods, his throat dry. "Yes, sir. Because of what I said at school. I'm sorry for not controlling my words. It's not just what you said," another advisor cuts in, his voice low and cold. "It's what the public thinks of you. Your words sparked a media storm. People are questioning whether the future king is fit to lead." George feels his face flush. He wants to argue, to say he's just a kid, that he didn't mean for his thoughts to go public. But the advisor's gaze silences him. He looks to his mother, hoping for protection, but Kate offers only a weak smile, as if trying to say everything will be okay. The throne isn't something you can choose or reject, the man with glasses continues. It's a destiny. You were born to be king, and every action, every word carries the weight of the kingdom. If you waver, the nation wavers. His words feel like an iron cage closing around George's mind. He thinks of the cellar journals of King George VI, who wanted to abdicate but was forced to stay, and Queen Elizabeth II, who sacrificed her personal happiness for the crown. He looks at his father, head bowed, hands clenched as if holding back something. Has his father heard these words, felt the same suffocation? I didn't mean to hurt anyone. George says, his voice small but firm. But I just wanted to be honest. I'm not sure I'm ready to be king. The room falls silent. An advisor clears his throat, as if shocked a 12-year-old would dare say such a thing. Camilla finally speaks, her voice cold as winter wind. Honesty is a luxury the royal family cannot afford, George. You must learn to put the kingdom above personal feelings. Anger flares in George's chest. He wants to ask Camilla about Diana, about the secrets he read online, about what she might be hiding. But his father's warning glance keeps him quiet. William stands, his voice calm but authoritative. This meeting is over. George will say nothing more until we issue an official statement. Thank you. Back at Kensington Palace, George curls up in his room, staring out the window. Reporters linger outside their flashes like unblinking eyes. He feels imprisoned, not just by the palace, but by the title Prince George he bears. Kate knocks and enters with a small tea tray. She sets it down, sits beside him, and takes his hand. I know today was hard, she says, her voice soft as a breeze, but I'm proud of you for saying what you feel. George looks at her, eyes stinging. But I messed everything up, Mum. I don't want to disappoint Dad or make you sad. I don't know if I can do what they want. Kate hugs him tightly, as if passing her strength to him. George, your father and I don't want you to be someone you're not. But you need to understand that your role isn't just a job. It's part of history of our family. And I believe you're strong enough to make it your own. Her words warm him, but also weigh him down. Night blankets, Kensington Palace, bringing a fierce rain that seems to want to wash away the royal family's secrets. George sits in a small sitting room, the firelight casting shadows on his tired but determined face. Across from him is King Charles III, his grandfather, whom he respects but slightly fears. Charles, with silver hair and deep eyes, sits in an armchair, holding a cold cup of tea. Grandfather George begins, his voice shaky. I don't know if I can do this. Everyone says I have to be king, but I'm scared I'll lose myself. Charles looks at his grandson, his gaze both stern and kind, as if seeing his younger self. He sets the tea down and sighs. George, when I was your age, I asked the same question. I thought the throne was a bird in a cage, and sometimes it is. George looks up, surprised by his grandfather's candor. He always thought Charles embraced his role naturally, as if born ready to be king. But now he sees that Charles too struggled and feared. How did you get through it? George asks, his voice eager. How did you handle all the pressure? Charles smiles faintly, a smile marked by years of trials. I didn't endure it, George. I learned to live with it. I found meaning in duty, however harsh. When I was your age, I faced criticism, expectations, and the same pain you're starting to feel. But I realized one thing: the throne isn't for us. It's for the people who believe in us. His words hit George like a cold gust, making him shiver. He wants to argue, to say he didn't choose this life, that he just wants freedom, but Charles's deep, experienced eyes silence him. Charles continues, his voice low but strong. You're allowed to doubt, George. You're allowed to fear, but you're not allowed to run. Not for your sake, but for those who depend on you, your family, your country. George bows his head, feeling the words' harsh truth. He thinks of his mother, Kate, who smiles through her quiet battle with illness. He thinks of his father, William, who strives to do right but sighs in the dark. And he thinks of Charlotte and Louis, his younger siblings, who see him as a hero. I understand, Grandfather George says, his voice small but firm. But if I'm to be king, I want to do it differently. I don't want to be like what I read in great-grandmother's journals. Charles nods, a spark of pride in his eyes. Then do it differently, George. But remember, change doesn't come from tearing down. It comes from building, from finding your own path within the bounds of duty. The conversation ends, but George's mind remains turbulent. His grandfather's words are like heavy stones, both empowering and oppressive. He excuses himself and steps out of the palace, heedless of the pouring rain. The cold rain soaks through George's uniform, but he doesn't stop. He walks into the ancient courtyard behind the palace, where stones bear the marks of past kings and queens. He stands under a dim lantern, letting the rain stream down his face. In that moment, the world feels silent save for the rain and his heartbeat. George reflects on everything: the journals of King George VI, who wanted to abdicate but couldn't, the confessions of Queen Elizabeth II, who sacrificed her life for the crown, the articles about Diana, who tried to escape but was consumed by the system, and his parents bound by that same system, yet shielding him. He thinks of Charlotte and Louis, their carefree laughter in the garden. He thinks of his mother, gentle but weary, and his father always striving for right. He's their big brother, the one who will protect them as they grow. That thought, like a small flame, ignites in his chest. He doesn't want to run anymore, not for the throne, but for his family, whom he loves more than anything. George lifts his face, letting the rain wash away his doubts. He whispers to himself, "If I have to be king, I'll do it for them, and I'll do it better." As dawn breaks, George returns to the palace, his uniform drenched, but his eyes alight like never before. He strides through the halls, leaving wet footprints on the marble. A new resolve has taken shape, not to blindly accept the throne, but to shape it in his own way. He knows the path ahead won't be easy. But under last night's rain, George found a piece of himself, not just a prince or heir, but a boy with a heart big enough to face his destiny. Early morning sunlight filters through Buckingham Palace's towering windows, illuminating the grand meeting room that has witnessed decisions shaping Britain's history. George stands before a mirror in his bedroom, no longer the boy hiding in Windsor Castle's cellar, afraid of his family's secrets. Today he is Prince George, ready to speak his truth. A private royal meeting convenes in a tense atmosphere. Advisors in stern gray suits sit around an ancient oak table. William and Kate sit together, their eyes a mix of worry and hope. Camilla, Queen Consort, sits in a far corner, her face unreadable. King Charles III, regal but weary, presides. At the center is George, a 12-year-old small among adults, but burning with resolve. Ladies and gentlemen, George begins, his voice clear, despite his racing heart. I know I've disappointed you these past few days. I said things I shouldn't have, and I'm sorry. He pauses, taking a deep breath. Every eye in the room is on him, from the advisor's stern gazes to his mother's gentle one. He continues, his voice steadier. But I've read the journals of my great-grandfather, King George VI, and my great-grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II. I've seen what they sacrificed, the pain they carried to keep the crown. I know my father, he glances at William, has tried to do things his way, but is still bound by tradition. William lowers his head, hands clenched as if George's words touch an old wound. George goes on, his gaze sweeping the room. I don't want to repeat that pain. I don't want the throne to be a burden, not just for me, but for those I love. An advisor frowns, about to speak, but Charles raises a hand for silence. George feels his grandfather's quiet support fueling his courage. I won't reject the crown, he says, his voice ringing with conviction, but I'll make it lighter, fairer, and truer to our time. Because I believe the throne isn't inherited by blood, but by justice. The room falls silent. An advisor coughs, as if unable to believe a 12-year-old could speak such words. Camilla raises an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise breaking her cool facade. Kate grips William's hand, her eyes shining with pride and tears. Charles smiles faintly, nodding as if seeing a glimpse of the future. William stands and walks to his son. He says nothing, just places a hand on George's shoulder and nods. In his father's eyes, George sees deep understanding, as if William sees his younger self, but stronger, braver. In that moment, George knows his father not only supports him, but believes in his chosen path. As the meeting ends, George steps out, feeling an invisible weight lift. He stands in the corridor, looking out at the royal gardens where flowers bloom under the sun. He doesn't promise to change the world, but he vows to himself to do things his way, with a heart for his family, wisdom from the past, and courage for the future. Sunlight bathes George's face, no longer that of a naive child. He stands taller, his shoulders broader, his eyes bright with purpose. Behind him, William and Kate stand together, their gazes reflecting faith and hope. In the distance, Big Ben's chimes echo a reminder that time moves on, and with it a kingdom awaits a new king, one who will lead not just by tradition, but by justice and compassion. Like, share, and subscribe to follow Prince George's inspiring journey in this royal saga.